Welcome, everyone, to the next generation of machine learning. I have three wonderful panelists here today. I'm Julia Klein. I'm a partner at March Capital. I do a lot of our investing in data infrastructure as well as enterprise AI. And I would say, one thing with AI is over the past decade, it has become, AI and machine learning have become these buzzwords that we hear over and over and over again. But cutting to the heart of it, there are some really, truly transformative things going on with machine learning. And we've seen 56% actually of companies be able to use machine learning for at least one mission critical use case in their companies. So today, we're talking through what the future of machine learning looks like and what we expect to happen over the next 10 years. And to do that, I have, as I mentioned, my three wonderful panelists, starting with Ceze. He is CEO of OctoML, which is a machine learning deployment automation platform that accelerates performance and enables seamless deployment of models at scale on any hardware. Second, we have Krishna Gade, the CEO of Fiddler, a pioneering company in the enterprise model performance management space. And it is used to validate, monitor, analyze, and explain ML solutions and build trust in AI. And lastly, we have Omri, the CEO of Run.ai, which is a business that helps companies execute on their AI initiatives quickly while keeping budgets under control by virtualizing expensive hardware resources to pool, share, and allocate efficiently. Welcome all. It is great to have you today, and thank you for joining us. I want to kick it off by just asking you to give a little bit more background on the companies that you're working on and kind of where they fit within the machine learning lifecycle. So whoever wants to start, open forum.
Okay, right. So I'll start. So the way we think about this is that intelligent applications have models at the center of what they do, right? So they're the brains of intelligent applications, but machine learning models are just too hard to deploy. Right, so it takes on average about 12 weeks to get a model. When it's done from a data science point of view, to get it ready for deployment, about 12 weeks. And we need to cut that down, and we need to remove dependence on expensive and rare to find engineering. We want to do that with automation. So our vision here is to bring agility to that process. So and get models ready for production for any hardware in hours instead of weeks. So we are built on the Apache TVM software foundation, which is something that we created about 6 years ago, and underpins deployments of major large-scale systems like Alexa and so on. So.
Awesome. At Fiddler, our focus is to build trust with AI. As machine learning and AI percolate in the enterprise, one of the big problems that customers face is, how do I trust this AI system? How is it working? Why is it making certain predictions? What Fiddler helps our customers is essentially create the transparency around how these AI systems are working. Let's say you're trying to use it for credit lending decisions or fraud detection systems. You really want to know how things are working. And so we provide the transparency and visibility by continuously monitoring these AI models. And so that's basically what we are focusing on. Yeah.
So I'm Omri from Run.ai. Run.ai is a startup that is building the compute resource management layer for AI infrastructure. We see transition with the fact that there are new applications building, training machine learning models, and then inferencing in production. And then on the other hand, there is new hardware to support the compute needs for AI workloads. So Run.ai build a software that bridges the gap between the new applications and the new AI hardware, so that the applications can run in the most efficient way on dedicated hardware for AI applications.
Awesome. And so I think one thing that we probably have quite a few of in the audience is people who are thinking through how they use machine learning within their own organizations. As I kind of mentioned, there's 56% that are using it, but if my quick math, and don't hold me to this, is correct, there's 44% that means that are not using machine learning. So if you're working in an organization or you're leading an organization and you're trying to get those first machine learning initiatives up and running, what would you suggest in terms of how to start and where a good baseline would be?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the times when companies think about machine learning, they focus on developing models, right? And so training models, but the infrastructure to actually deploy models or operationalize it is very different from the tools that you need to train models. So today we have a lot of open source frameworks and a lot of tools that help developers, data scientists, analysts to build models. But when it comes to infrastructure to deploy and operationalize them, that's where there are a lot of challenges. So if companies are serious about machine learning in terms of affecting their business use cases, there needs to be an investment that needs to be made in the proper ML infrastructure, whether that's deployment or monitoring tools, to make sure that you're actually shipping models. So that's basically the first thing that I would look at in terms of actually operationalizing machine learning.
Louis, Omri?
I'll take it. So I would suggest, before going into critical models in production, I would suggest just have AI models, some AI models. The most important thing for a start, in my opinion, is choose a business problem, a real business problem that you have seen other in your ecosystem. If this is a FSI, if that's a financial institution, so other financial institutions already solving this problem with AI. So you can copy, it's okay. Start small, start with something that doesn't have to be the most important thing within the organization, and then start to build the foundations for building AI within the organization, and you'll get to critical business problems that are being solved with AI. We all want to be, or I would assume, most organizations want to be AI first, meaning we can solve any problem with some AI capabilities, but it takes time to get there. Start with things that are so basic that are already solved many times within any other place in the ecosystem.
Yeah, just to underscore that, I would say for you to use AI, first find the problem that you can solve with AI, right? So I'm sure you have some. And then, I would say that the tools to create models today are just, evolved a lot in the last, say, 5 years or so. Tools to create and curate training data, tools to help you create or find an existing model that solves a problem for you. And then you go quickly from there to, okay, you have a model. How do you actually get this model to add value to your business? And that's when I think you should find a way of using as much as you can the existing infrastructure that you have for software development, which is not the case today, right? Today, for you to put machine learning models into deployment, you need to get specialized people that understand machine learning and understand where they run. So we want to bridge that with automation. So.
And for those who are maybe a little bit more well-versed, companies that maybe have some of those internal teams and systems in place, how do they think about what the best practices are and how they can really up-level from where they are today? And I think that includes how do you think about prioritizing all the different tools that you mentioned?
So one thing that we at Run.ai see constantly is what we call shadow AI within the enterprise. It means that there are many different business units or many different teams that are each of the teams trying to reinvent the wheel, if you like, build their own processes for bringing models to production, build their own software stack, use their own hardware. It doesn't make sense. Okay, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't scale. So the first thing that we suggest for an enterprise that is already down the road, is advanced with AI, has some AI models in production, build center of excellence, okay, COE within the organization, consolidate the resources, not only the compute resources that Run.ai can help you optimize, but the resources in general, the people, like the best practices, the know-how. Start to build foundations for scaling these AI applications within your organization. And until this is being done, a lot of resources, human resources, and money is being just thrown without a reason. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah. And to add to that, I would just say, find ways of iterating on how this model is solving problems for you as quickly as possible. Like iterating on a new version of the model, getting it out there, get it deployed, monitors how it's doing, and then keep iterating, turning the crank, right? So.
Yeah, I think the model development lifecycle is fairly distinct from the software development lifecycle. Models are actually and you need to be iterated upon much more frequently. So therefore, I think if drawing upon having a center of excellence team that can actually stand up your infrastructure for creating, deploying models, but also monitoring them so that you can actually iterate on those models is going to be super important, right? We have seen, even bigger companies like tech companies, case study like Zillow, where they've put models into production and they have seen model failures affect their business very in a critical manner. So if you're going to use machine learning to affect your business, you need to really define that MDLC process and really get the infrastructure right to actually have an ROI positive on your business. So that's going to be very critical.
I want to come back to Zillow in just a few minutes and maybe some of the lessons that can be learned from that. We'll call it a failure or a mistake, and others. But first, I want to touch upon some of the exciting or interesting successful use cases that you've seen. So just a question for anyone, what is maybe the most exciting or interesting use case that you've seen within the enterprise to date?
So I'll mention one. One is a customer that's using AI to find I'll say inappropriate content in videos. So today we have a giant amount of video. Think of it, petabytes of video, right? So, and you have to do computer vision every single frame of every single video to see whether there's something that's inappropriate in the video. Something that you couldn't do with humans just sitting there and watching them, right? So what was shown there was a path to actually make that viable by making it 9x faster on a hardware that they can run it on and make it viable because of that, right? So
that's awesome.
So one of the big things that we are seeing in the financial industry is there is a movement happening from simple quantitative models to AI and machine learning based models for critical businesses like credit decisioning and fraud detection systems. We're working with a very large bank where they moved from quantitative models to set credit limits for their customers to machine learning based models where they could take advantage of a lot of unstructured information about their customers. And they were able to see ROIs to the tune of $50 million of additional revenue per quarter, right? So there is a huge amount of data that customers are collecting about all their users, but the machine learning, without using machine learning, there's like little ROI when it comes to actually putting them into business. So I think like a lot of old school use cases can actually really benefit from using machine learning. Credit risk is an example, but then when it comes to like a more generic use case that we see is product recommendations is like a universal use case that we see where you have a lot of inventory of products, you have long tail that you want to recommend to customers. I think there's a huge opportunity to recommend the right content to the right user at the right time. That actually can be a huge business opportunity for companies to invest in machine learning. Those would be the two things that come to my mind.
Yeah, so first of all, there are many very exciting applications for AI. I'll say that from Run.ai perspective, we're not always exposed to the application that the customer is using our platform for. We're managing compute resources, and on top of Run.ai, they are building and deploying their models. But in some cases, we are. Something that excites me specifically is all the world of autonomous driving, and one of our biggest customers is a very large company that is building models for autonomous driving, and we actually saw the models, what they do in production, and how they work on the safety of driving this car, and this is extremely exciting for me. But I would say that many other applications are being done using Run.ai that I'm not exposed to. So, yeah.
Well, and if you're asking about exciting applications, I can't resist mentioning. I have a weakness in life sciences, and I just can't imagine a more appropriate general use case because it's multimodal fundamentally, right? You have medical imaging, you have genomics data, you have medical records. So you're already talking about large language models to understand medical records, talking about computer vision to understand medical imaging, and you're talking about deep genomics, understanding things that are so fundamentally complex that there's just no other tool to understand and make progress there, right? So life sciences, I think, is just primed for AI everywhere there. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a space that we actually at March have looked at recently in more detail and made a couple of investments in. So But all amazing, cool applications. So now we're going to switch to the juicy side and ask about the difficulties and maybe some of the failures that we've seen with AI and how, moreover, right, how to prevent those from happening. So today, right, 10 to 20% of models get into production. So what can we do to improve that percentage and to make sure that when companies are using AI and using machine learning models, they're not creating these models and then having them sit on the shelf?
Yeah, I think I can start there because it's really why we started the company, right? So, machine learning models aren't code, what I mean? So you have to make them into bits that a machine can execute, right? So, but the process of getting a machine learning model ready to be executed on your hardware of choice today is very, very complex because there's no other, I would say, component of an application that's so dependent on hardware as machine learning models. Right? So if you have a machine learning model to run on an NVIDIA GPU, you're going to have to know what exact GPU you have. You have to figure out what libraries should run there. You have to potentially fiddle with your model until it actually gets into the right shape and size and so on. And this huge dependence between model and hardware creates this very complex process that I think limits deployment a lot because you have to find people that understand machine learning, people that understand systems, people that understand hardware, right? So, so our view there is that this should be as easy as deploying any other piece of software. You should have portability to run where you need them to run on any cloud instance, on any cloud, or run it on the edge. And bridging that, I think, removes a huge gap into actually trying a model that you have out there and see if it actually solves a business problem for you, right? So.
Yep. Omri, I know you're in this space as well, so any thoughts here?
I absolutely agree, and I think there are so many missing pieces in this path to production for organizations that you cannot point on one thing. But I would say that first of all, someone need to own it within the organization. Someone need to have this AI strategy, and before we even go down to the software and the tools that are mandatory to have a streamlined path to production, there must be some strategy around it. And the organizations that we've seen more successful than the others have, whether it's, someone, call it a project manager, it can be different levels, but someone that oversee the process and understand that there is a lot of work to do, and it's not one solution or one problem that needs to be solved. There are many problems there. That's the first thing. The second thing, that person should get credibility from management, okay, because it takes time. The second problem that we've seen, that organizations do not have the patience. Machine learning is complicated from building the models to deploying it. There are a lot of things that are not trivial, and without the backup of the organization, you would not get to production. So you can think about machine learning in the model or AI like a research problem. Research is like a black hole of money, right? Like you just throw money and you hope that something will come out of there. So you need to keep it within the organization to keep that mentality that it takes time, it takes education, and that's the second thing. And then the third thing, assuming that you have someone that oversees that and learn the market and go and see success of others and you have the patience within the organization, then we actually believe that you must build the best infrastructure for your people within the organization. People is the most important asset, most expensive, and you want them to be productive. So if you're not giving them what they need in order to be productive, you're just wasting cycles, and you cannot expect to see success over time. So I would say those three things to summarize. One, someone need to own it, the strategy of AI. Two, patience. And three, build the right infrastructure for your people, end-to-end, from how they build the models through the deployment and all the life cycle.
Yeah. Just to add to that, right? I mean, basically, there are 3 T's that you need to deploy machine learning. Talent, as Omri was saying, tools, the infrastructure. The third most important thing is going to be trust. Because I think unlike traditional software, machine learning models are not written in a declarative language where your developers can read line by line. They're essentially a black box. So you need to invest in ways that you can actually understand how these models work, so that you can convince, if you're running an AI team within an organization, so that you can convince your business counterparts to actually use your AI products in production business. And that's how you would actually extract more ROI. So the third part is going to be really critical to actually operationalize AI for ROI positive business.
Yeah, Krishna, I'd like you to go more in depth there, and kind of maybe if you could provide some examples of when there isn't trust, right? What can go wrong, and how do you fix that as an organization?
Yeah, I mean, we have seen many cases where quote unquote AI has gone wrong, right? We've talked about the Zillow example. If you are implementing AI at production scale and it's affecting your business, and if you don't really know how things are working, and in their case, it was potentially underpriced or overpricing houses and made business decisions to go and buy a bunch of houses, and that essentially affected their business. But we also have seen cases where companies invested in AI and where AI started making biased decisions to their end users. And we've seen the Apple Card example a couple of years ago, where customers complained about gender bias in terms of how Apple was setting credit limits. We have seen cases where companies going into regulatory risk, especially if they're in healthcare or financial services, discriminating how machine learning models work. So trust is all encompassing. So having transparency into machine learning models will help you, mitigate these things much ahead of time. And also helps your business folks to be much more comfortable using AI products. Whether, let's say you're an asset wealth management team, they want to use machine learning for portfolio allocation. They'll be much more, be willing to use an AI product if they can understand how it works. And so that's kind of, what we try to work with when we work with customers that are operationalizing AI, that this aspect of transparency and explainability and model monitoring is so critical.
Awesome. And so looking forward a little bit, right? Thinking through as companies build their machine learning tool sets, right? How do they think about how things interact? And I mean, you guys all work in related spaces, right? Within this world. How do you think about, when you're thinking about the pieces fitting together, how can you be cognizant of that, and how would you recommend somebody think about it?
Yeah, so I can speak to that. So we're seeing a pretty clear shift from fully end-to-end integrated platforms like SageMaker or Azure ML, where you go in one-stop shop, to having best of breed in each step. And it's great to see that the clear interfaces are being put in place. There's a pretty clear data interface, a pretty clear interface of a model registry where models are stored, and you can take it out, optimize, get it ready, and put it back in. For example, these interfaces are being put in place. So I'd say that the way to think about this is just make sure that whatever solution you are starting with actually has provision for connecting with the other best of breed pieces in the data side, in the model creation side, and the deployment and monitoring side. So,
Krishna, Omri, anything to add there?
Yeah, I'll just add to it that this world is evolving. So any decision that you're taking now, don't do decision that you'll not be able to to change over time, because you'll see more and more platforms and tools coming in coming years. So build open platforms within your organization that can scale horizontally, vertically, whatever it is, right? Like that's what you need to have.
make it future-proof.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So speaking of the next few years,
Okay.
what I'll ask you guys to pull out your crystal balls a little bit here, and what do you see as the future of machine learning over the next, call it, 5-year horizon? And what do you think will be the most interesting applications that we'll see over the next 5 years?
Well, okay, all right. So now, how long do we have again?
Be as crazy as you want.
Well, the first thing I think we're going to see within 10 years is just the ability of programming very complex systems with natural language. You're going to have robotic components that can go and, in a household or an industry, just be able to just tell it, like, I wanted this to be done, and that gets translated into a program that gets executed, like natural language programming interfaces for automation systems. And then the second one, I'll go back to life sciences, right? So can we actually cut down the process of, for example, clinical trials taking 3-4 years, can actually build very complex models that can actually get pretty close to providing useful information in making decisions to accelerate the process of taking drugs into the market, right? And then just medical diagnostics in general. I think I'm fully convinced that within 10 years, we're going to have most medical diagnosis done via AI or heavily assisted by AI. So,
Yeah, so for me, like I think two sectors, right? In financial services, I would expect in the next 5 years a lot of critical business processes from credit decisioning, portfolio management, wealth management. They will all be influenced in a big way using machine learning and AI because there's a proliferation of unstructured data that's available that companies are going to take advantage of. And when it comes to healthcare, we're already seeing advances in machine learning helping critically. Like for example, we're working with a healthcare company that's using machine learning to detect sepsis. It's essentially if you ever are in ICU, it's an infection that you can acquire, and within hours you might be dead. And so being able to monitor, get physiological data and monitor for sepsis and be able to predict in advance so that you can actually treat patients. That's another use case that's emerging. Another is essentially in life sciences monitoring radiology data. Right today, like radiologists spend hours looking at the data to see where if which second actually has a particular cancerous tissue in the X-ray. We could cut down a lot of that time to really pinpoint to that particular frame where there's a particular cancerous tissue or whatever that people are examining. So there's a lot of interesting use cases, I would say, in financial services and healthcare that's going to have a real impact on the society and the business. That's going to happen in the next 5 years.
I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach here, because the company that I founded is a company that enable others to build applications. So I'm not really good at thinking what it can do. But when we founded Run.ai, what I envisioned is a world full of AI applications, and I'll explain why infrastructure is so important. And it's really hard to predict what we're going to have. Think about the internet like 20 years ago. And think about the bandwidth that, as you got more and more bandwidth and more companies that enabled the internet to actually grow the bandwidth, more and more applications that we couldn't even imagine that are going to be in the world were being, built because of the infrastructure that enabled smart people to think of new things that we haven't been thinking of before. Now, when it comes to AI, I can imagine what things that we're thinking about today. So I mentioned autonomous driving, and there is healthcare, and there is the financial. Those are things that, those are extremely important, and it's easy, or not that easy, but you can envision how business problems are going to be solved with AI. But I think it's much bigger than that. I think that once we'll go through that phase of building the right infrastructure for people will come with applications with AI that we can't imagine. We can't think about it right now. And between I would say the white and the black, there is a lot of gray. Sorry for the bad terminology of colors. No, it's not gray. It's actually pink and whatever it is. But there are going to be amazing things that I just don't think we can think of right now. And that's what I want to see. That's where I see this world is going.
Well, it's so interesting.
Can I add just one more thing to it? So on that point, one thing that we're already seeing trends today is using AI/ML to improve AI/ML itself, right? So look at the results. Have you remember seen the Asher drawing of a hand drawing a hand? I think it's a perfect analogy here, where you using AI/ML to, in our case, we use AI/ML to actually produce very efficient codes for a given model on a given hardware. We learn from trying and automatically generate better code, but people have shown really good results on using AI/ML to design AI/ML chips. So the TPU V3 or V4 already has been designed and placed and routed and produced. So the fact that machine learning is optimizing machine learning itself is going to lead to super. I'm not talking about singularity here, just because that's too dark, but talking about a positive view on singularity here. So
it's a wild thought, honestly. It's I think the first time, right, many people were introduced to AI was with Watson, right, and the Jeopardy application, and it's crazy that is now a decade ago, and to think where we'll be in the next decade is pretty insane. But I think a question to follow up on that is, there's also other stakeholders that come into play, right? Regulation being one of them, especially as you enter these industries like healthcare, like autonomous driving. How do we think about the implications there, and how do you think that really evolves over the next 5 years, that relationship with AI, with some of these other stakeholders? And I don't know, Krishna, you want to start here?
Yeah. I think that's going to be a very important topic, right? While we are bullish about advances in AI and big companies creating large language models. I heard Google is working on a universal language model that can do everything, including writing code. So, so there is this aspect of ethics and how AI can be used. How is it going to affect us as a society? That's going to be very important, and for all of us to think about. Regulations is one way to solve that, but there's also a lot of companies trying to come together, to build responsible AI frameworks, bringing multiple personas together, not just the modelers, the data scientists that are building the models, but product people, compliance folks, different stakeholders within the organizations have to be brought to the table so that you are trying to make sure that your AI products are ethically built for your end users. And that's going to be very important for us. Regulations is one way to solve for it, but there's also other ways to solve it.
Yeah, I think you should use AI for that too, so, there's
The AI
no reason
regulator.
why. Well, there's no
You
reason
heard
why.
it here first.
No, seriously, like I don't think there's any fundamental reason why you can't express good chunks of what the regulation should be, and even law itself in a way that's interpretable and it has ambiguity that you can compute, right, and analyze with AI. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. I'm looking at the clock down below. So I want to open it up to everyone in the audience, and we'll have time for maybe a question or two here, if anyone has any for our esteemed panelists here.
You had mentioned this whole idea of autonomous driving and all of that, and there's a lot of bureaucracy that will kind of raise up. I was always surprised at how fast it actually went from just keeping you in your lane to actually driving. Do you think that the regulations that you will then encounter will really inhibit it, or how do you kind of get past that whole no to people that will never understand it, right? And to be able to introduce AI into that environment.
Yeah, maybe I can take it. I think we are fundamentally believing at Fiddler that trust in AI is not just like for like a kind of a checkbox as a compliance checkbox, right? It's actually going to make your AI product better. So the quote unquote trustworthy AI, responsible AI is in effect going to help you build better products for your customer, to build better models for your customers, right? So that's the worldview. There's obviously there are other schools of thought that this essentially the model transparency is not required, and you could just like keep building black box models, and people will learn to live with it. There's obviously two schools of thought exist today, and we'll see which one will win. But we think if you want to be regulatory proof, you need to be investing in responsible AI and investing in model transparency and governance and bringing multiple stakeholders within an organization. So you actually have a process and tools in place to actually mitigate when these things come to life. That's how you would be able to build better products for your customers.
Yeah. Can I try to that very briefly? Yeah. So
Absolutely.
I would say just showing that it works, is the first step, right? So, I like this thought experiment on explainable AI, which is like if you show that there's a model that can do better diagnostics based on data, you just say like, look, I can give accuracy is 5% higher than an explainable model that you can understand. Which one would you choose? Like if you're the patient, like would you choose a more accurate model that has been tested and proven that it works with a large body of data? Or would you choose the model that's less accurate but you can understand? And if you ask people around it, there's very divided opinions. So I'd say this has to inform regulation. So there might be some things that it is fundamentally a black box because it's just so complex that you can't explain it, but you can show with high probability that it works well, and then you live with it, right? So.
Any other questions? Oh, question over here.
You mentioned that there's a real connection between the hardware and what the AI was. So are we moving into a world where it's like a full box sale, where you've got like a blade server with the AI built into it, or is this we're still not far from that?
So I think the question is, do we see a world that will be boxes that were custom made for AI? Absolutely, it's kind of already the case, right? So there's many silicon providers today that have specialized silicon for AI workloads. The real problem there, though, is that there has been a large number of companies that have been hardware first and then software second. Those are the ones that are not surviving right now. Why? Because models change really fast. If you're designing a chip, you're going to spend $500 million designing a chip. It's going to be ready 3 years from now, you better know that either you made a really good bet and you happen to be right, or you made a box that has the right software stack to be able to support where models are likely to be, right? So the state of affairs today is that hardware diversity is increasing very fast for AI infrastructure. Intel bought, Habana, GraphCore is coming in the market now. Samba Nova, Systems is making a lot of progress. They all need a way to program that in a way that actually abstracts the complexity of this hardware. And I think the reality today is that the tools are still too complex, and there's a lot of work to do to improve that software stack. But we've very quickly converged into what you described, having boxes specialized so that they can actually program and use in real scenarios. So,
Anyone have any other follow-up on that?
So I think that also here, going back to what we spoke on earlier on, like some open platforms, I think looking forward, there is going to be, I think, decoupling between the hardware and the software stack. You don't want to be in a situation where you have to buy, a box, and this box have everything there, and it cannot work with other, tools or platforms that you optimize for another box, right? It's just not an efficient world. So over time, I believe that we will see abstraction, that from the user perspective, or from the, you just build your applications and you don't really care which hardware is under the hood, and you can mix and match, and that's the world we want to see.
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of
What's it take for the hardware manufacturer to get us there?
That's the evolution of the infrastructure stack
Right.
now, and there is a lot of work that needs to be done. First, we need to see more hardware in the market. Then we need to see the challenges, and then to bring the solutions. Think of, I don't know, like think of your think of your laptop. You don't care which processor you have under the hood there, and everything is abstracted for you, right? So it doesn't make sense that it will be the same for. That it won't be the same for AI, right? That's where we want to get, but it will take time.
Yeah.
We'll be there.
And to add to that, I would say the first thing is actually having a viable open source machine learning operating system, which I don't want to sound too self-serving here, but this is why we started, the Apache TVM project at the University of Washington. I wear two hats. I'm a professor at the University of Washington where Apache TVM started. And the whole vision there was essentially that, to peel away the model and the software infrastructure from the hardware by creating an open source middle layer between the model and the hardware that can actually be retargeted in a way that doesn't require a whole lot of effort. That was the genesis of the Apache Tensor Virtual Machine project. Because the reality today, I don't want to be too inflammatory here, is that, we look like the mainframe, like the AI ecosystem looked like mainframes in the late 70s, early 80s. There's tightly coupling between hardware and software. So if you bought an IBM mainframe, you had to buy an IBM OS, an IBM database. And if you're going to use IBM's database, you have to buy IBM hardware. Well, today, NVIDIA is that. I mean, I respect NVIDIA a lot, and we collaborate with them, and they are more and more embracing open source. But the reality is that NVIDIA has the most robust system software for AI ML, and you go buy NVIDIA hardware because NVIDIA has great software. But then if you go and buy NVIDIA hardware, you have to use NVIDIA software, right? So, and with what we've been putting a lot of effort on, and we're very grateful with the rest of the AI ML industry, like Qualcomm, who's a close collaborator on Apache TVM, and Amazon, and AMD, and now NVIDIA as well, in building this open source infrastructure that allows you to think about machine learning models as a portable thing that you can choose where to run, and then let the best provider of hardware or software win based on their merits, not based on just tight coupling and lack of choice, right? So.
What about hardware as a service for that?
I think that's what cloud providers do, right? So, great point. Yeah, cloud providers don't provide hardware as a service, right? So.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. Anyone else have a question? Yep. Back row? Or? Whoop. You guys can fight it out.
So I want to just ask you guys about reducing the barriers to entry, because right now this is such a specialized activity, and what we've seen in other categories of software is that eventually we get to something that's kind of like a Wix or something like that, where anybody can create a website. How do you envision the next couple of years, given the complexity of AI and ML? How do you envision sort of that trajectory playing out? From what I see, you guys are all part of
I'll start. So I think that we are going to see the reversed world. Like you gave an example of Wix, okay, building websites, right? Not everyone, they democratize building websites, but there are also experts that build their own in order to get to different outcome in the end. So also with machine learning models and AI, I wouldn't expect that every organization is going to build top-notch, innovative AI applications with AI models, but there will be some that will do that. But in order to really democratize it, yes, we need to make it easy for people that are not experts to build simple models or not simple that are going to do the job. And we're going to see full diversity from full automation of building AI models, in a very simplistic, very simple way, so that non-AI knowledgeable people can build AI, models, and till the other side of the spectrum that researchers in the academy that will never work on this like black box capabilities and will build super innovative capabilities to try and do things that nobody else is doing. So we're going to see everything, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, there's already an emergence of low-code, no-code platforms, right? So that they can give tools to developers, analysts who probably are not well versed with machine learning to be able to get some machine learning and AI models built, and then you will have like more specialized tools for more serious use cases where you need to be more careful about what kind of models you build. So you would eventually have different flavors of platforms that you would have to pick from based on the team. Maybe your line of business analytics team would use a different way of actually using machine learning for, say, measuring LTV or churn of your customers. But then you may have a product team that's actually operationalizing machine learning based products would use a different stack. So you would see all kinds of those things. I think that's going to happen.
Yeah, I think it's about templates. There's a large collection of models today in different categories that are pretty close to ready to be used, and I think that's where it started. I think Hugging Face is doing a fantastic job there, where there's classes of models that you can plug and play and use and make it easy to refine for your use case. I feel like that's how I like your example of websites. Website creation got easier over time, starting with templates, right? So you had the store template, you had the homepage template, and so on. Similar thing with machine learning, right? So you have a collection of existing models that get pretty close to what you need, and you customize it a little bit. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. And hopefully in 10 years from now, we'll be looking back on this and it will all seem like commonplace stuff. And we'll have the whole next generation of AI that has an ML that has emerged. So thank you to the audience and thank you very much to our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.